We know so little about the ocean, but what we do know is that it's full of life. For many of us, it's more than that. For many of us, it's a lifestyle. Some of us go to the ocean to feed our families, while others go for its pure beauty and enjoyment. It's a scary thought to think that all of that is going away. All of this beauty around us, all of the life and opportunity it provides, it's gone. Just about anyway.
Ocean acidification is an event that the world is experiencing in today's age. Main cause of ocean acidification is through the use of fossil fuels. The human population has become so heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and it's had a negative impact on our oceans today. Shelled organisms are the most affected by this, and it is because of the material that their shells are made out of. So when the ocean becomes more acidic, it causes problems in the shell structure in the organism. So when they grow their shells, they have a hard time maintaining that, and in severe cases you'll see their shell just completely dissolve, and their shells will start to deform, and they just won't look right like they're supposed to. However, shelled organisms aren't the only marine organisms that are affected by this. Any organism that lives within the oceans is going to experience an impact. For example, just any regular fish that's swimming around, it's going to mess with their metabolic processes, and as well as their ability to be able to hunt for prey, things like that. Normal life for them isn't going to be the same as it usually is because of this. Marine organisms, however, aren't going to be the only ones experiencing a negative impact. The human population is going to be experiencing this as well. You have countries like France, for example, where they have high consumption rates of shelled organisms such as mussels, clams, oysters, as well as the United States on the East Coast or on the West Coast as well. But there are thousands of fishermen who rely on these organisms to make money. And when pH levels in the ocean lower, as I talked about before, these organisms struggle in those conditions, and you're going to see them start to die off, and there's not going to be as much anymore. And so you're going to see the loss of billions of dollars due to the loss of these organisms, and you're going to see thousands of jobs just slowly disappear because of this.
Here we have a diagram explaining the series of chemical reactions that occur within the ocean during ocean acidification. So first you have carbon dioxide being absorbed by the ocean, and it turns into a carbonic acid when it is mixed with water. This breaks apart into three ions: bicarbonate ions, hydrogen ions, and carbonate ions. So as you can see from the left to the right, you can see the shells, they look okay, and it goes all the way over to the right. You see an increase in hydrogen and carbonate ions, and this is what makes the water more acidic. And when it does this, it deforms the shells, and as you can see on the right side, you can see these shells that are more deformed. Some of the shells aren't even present anymore because they can't survive due to the acidic levels in there, the low pH levels.
Hi, I'm Sam, and today I'm going to talk about the rising sea levels. Rising sea levels mean that the overall ocean level is rising above a normal range, in which case that can be very detrimental to areas along the coast. The things that are causing this are like global warming, so human pollution is a big factor in this. And all the CO2 that we're putting into the atmosphere is causing the greenhouse effect and greenhouse gases to be trapped, and that is melting the icebergs. And icebergs are made of water. So when we put more water into our oceans, it's causing them to rise, which is having significant problems on housing and things that are along the coast. Other things that are adding to this are like natural disasters, hurricanes. Everything has a play in the rising of the water. What we can do to help stop this is recycle, reuse, carpool, and one big thing that I think a lot of governments aren't taking advantage of is green energy sources. I'm talking solar farms, wind turbines, things like that can actually have a really big impact and will help cut back on this. Now, for areas being affected, I'm going to specifically talk about the Netherlands and Maine. So the Netherlands is actually really bad right now, and it is 22 feet under sea level. Now, that doesn't mean that it's flooded, it just means that when they have really heavy rainstorms, when it's high tide, the water is going up, it's flooding areas, it is damaging their housing, and bad things are happening to their land, like erosion of their beaches and natural habitats for animals are going away because of this, which isn't good because we're seeing a depletion of different kinds of species and biodiversity. Places that are in the US that are being affected by this is Maine, Florida, or any state that touches the ocean. Like everywhere is being affected. There's nowhere that's really untouched unless it's a landlocked state, because there's no water in a landlocked state that's from the ocean. Next up, you should see a map of Maine, and that is the expected ocean level rising and how Maine's going to be affected. As you can see, the red areas and the orange are the places that are either going to be flooded or are in danger of flooding in the next couple of years. There are ways that places are looking into helping solve this problem, and some possible solutions that they have come up with are coastal cities need proper irrigation and they need to build up seawalls to help with proper drainage. They're doing that in a lot of different places. That's one thing the Netherlands is doing and trying to do to help slow the impact that rising sea levels have. Another would be reducing the future greenhouse gases. So that's where the solar farms come in and where I think governments need to take more action. And then existing greenhouse gases must be removed from the atmosphere. So maybe planting some trees would be a good idea or a good example of how we can do that.
Another problem the ocean is currently facing is habitat loss. Although it isn't very noticeable from land, it is changing and harming the ocean. The adverse effects that habitat loss has in the ocean not only directly affects the organisms involved, but it also has the potential to change how resourceful the ocean is to humans. Habitat loss is exactly how it sounds. It is the loss of the habitat of a species. More specifically, it is the destruction of an organism's habitat, leaving them homeless and threatening their survival. Although it seems a minor issue, habitat loss is ranked number 1 for the cause of species extinction worldwide, and it occurs more often than one may think. However, habitat loss isn't always just the loss of a habitat. Habitats can also be modified or fragmented, which can also cause problems for the organisms. Habitat fragmentation is the act of dividing a habitat into smaller fragments. This is usually done by humans, and some examples of this would be the building of dams, roads, bridges, and other structures that would make an organism's habitat smaller than it originally was. Habitat fragmentation makes it harder for organisms to find food, mates, and other resources because they are limited to a smaller area and competition increases. Habitat modification is the change of a habitat which yields similar effects. When a habitat is modified by the insertion of man-made structures, the insertion of new organisms, or an overall environmental change, organisms are forced to adapt to environments they are not used to and their survival is threatened. In the ocean, habitat loss is seen almost everywhere, affecting the biodiversity of the entire ocean. In coastal areas, human-made structures such as dams change the flow of fresh water, increasing the salinity of coastal waters. These dams also decrease migration and species richness along the coast. In a journal article by Laura Aroldi, she describes how these decreases in species and change in environment result in a gradual change from a complex habitat to a less complex habitat. Certain species thrive in these less complex habitats, which amplifies the changes to the system that have already been made. This causes more adverse effects on the diversity of the ecosystem. Moreover, humans also harm habitats through agriculture and industrial waste and their role in climate change. The chemical runoff from agriculture and the waste produced by industries can harm the vegetation and individual organisms of habitats, causing modifications and changes to occur. The role humans play in climate change also contributes to ocean acidification, which has already begun to destroy coral reefs, seashells, and other shelled organisms and leave many species homeless or in need of a new source of food. Not only do humans cause habitat loss, but natural disasters do as well. Typhoons, hurricanes, storms, and other weather incidents can cause massive damage. Compared to humans, however, natural disasters are much less persistent and habitats can usually recover from such events. As I mentioned earlier, an example of habitat loss is visible in coral reefs. Ocean acidification is the process by which carbon dioxide from the atmosphere reacts with seawater to form carbonic acid, which can damage the skeleton of corals and many other shelled organisms. The amount of carbonate ions is also reduced, preventing corals from building their skeletons for protection. This in turn leads to the death of the corals, and the organisms that relied on the corals for food, shelter, and other resources are left homeless with their habitats degraded. Another example, although it is not in the ocean, is in Maine. When Maine was first being colonized, all towns and cities were focused around a town center, making it easy to get around town and to the center. However, towns and cities are now being built in a sprawled fashion, and many more roads and structures are being built to make areas more accessible. The excessive building has fragmented the environment, causing habitat loss in the form of fragmentation. Overall, habitat loss is a serious problem that needs to be addressed immediately. Many organizations, such as the Nature Conservancy, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Conservation International, all fight to conserve and protect the habitats of the world. These organizations have been working to regulate land use and developmental projects and create conservation areas on land and in the oceans where wildlife and habitats can thrive. As individuals, the biggest thing that can be done is to limit your carbon emissions. Climate change is the greatest cause of habitat loss, and humans are the biggest source of carbon emissions. Although habitat loss can be lessened, it cannot be prevented, as nature also plays a role in habitat loss. However, many habitats can be saved if everyone does their part.
The fishing industry has been one of the largest and most useful industries in the world for centuries. It has provided millions of people with secure jobs and billions with dinner on the table. Fishing alone has been around for as long as time can tell, but the process of how we fished has changed drastically over the years, and that might not be a good thing. This has led to overfishing, which has caused the downfall of the fishing industry. But what is overfishing? How is it hurting? And how can we fix it? To start, here's what it is. Overfishing is the removal of a species of fish from a body of water at a rate that the species cannot replenish in time, resulting in those species either becoming depleted or very unpopulated in a given area. We see this awful event happening at a local level, but more frequently in a global scale, which has the largest impact. What is important to understand about overfishing is that it does not affect every marine organism like something as ocean acidification does. Overfishing is species-specific and only affects a certain type of marine organism. But the biggest question we all may ask is, how does overfishing actually happen? For years, we've had so many rules and regulations of the fishing industry. Like, could it be illegal fishing or could it be something else? Although illegal fishing does have an impact, it's not the biggest. Bycatch is overwhelmingly the biggest cause of overfishing, and bycatch is when a species of fish is caught, mostly industrially, but is not the targeted species. These untargeted fish are kept even though they were not supposed to be caught, which causes them to deplete at a rapid rate quicker than what they would naturally. Even though it is not illegal if the fish is in season, it still adds up to a large portion of fish being taken out of the ocean when they really shouldn't have been. And I know what you may be thinking, trust me, I like a tuna steak as much as the next guy, but this has seriously affected our marine environments and could cause a disturbance in the whole ecosystem. I'm a marine biology major, and what my professors have taught me most compared to what I learned in high school was to think of the ocean as a machine. They've also broken and fixed more trucks than I could count, so this metaphor really works for me. If one very important part of the machine breaks or falls off, the machine may still will work, but not as efficiently as it could, or it might not work at all. If we do our best to look at this in a food chain or food web perspective, it can really show how bad overfishing is. Take a prey and the population of that prey and have it go from 100% to 0%. Any predator of that fish will not have a food source and eventually die off as well. This is just a small scale example of the impact of overfishing, but there are much more. If a machine it's a machine and it needs constant work and maintenance and checking in on, and anything we can do to protect what we need. The fewer fish in the ocean, the less food for larger marine animals and predators to survive on, leading to an imbalance in the food webs and fewer jobs and sources of food we have. As of today, there are 455 critically endangered species of fish, and 87 of those species may possibly even be extinct. The marine environment is the biggest threatened structure of overfishing, but it also affects humans in a lot of ways too. Fishing or consumption of fish provides up to 3 billion people's daily intake of protein or source of income. It provides people with secure jobs to support their families, and fishing is also one of the most joyful things for some people, and it is shown to make people a lot happier. From my personal experience, fishing has been such a positive thing in my life and the people around me. But when I take a step back and I realize we need to control this before it gets to a point where it's unfixable. There's always a bright side to everything, even when it comes to overfishing. Believe it or not, at this point, we're not endangering our oceans with overfishings yet. The global exploitation rates are well below long-term sustainable levels at a whole ecosystem level. This means the ocean can support considerably higher sustainable catch than currently harvest. Overfishing has happened, but only to a small fraction of species as a result of intensive and selective fishing. So this is good news, but not great news. Although we are not killing our oceans, we aren't exactly helping them, but we can. All we need to do is manage our fishing at a global level and manage our shopping at a local level. To do this, there's a saying called save overfishing by keep fishing. If we put a species that are endangered and we put them in a marine protected environment and let them reproduce until their population are higher enough so it isn't a problem that they're endangered, and we fish a different species of fish. And once the first species is back to normal, we can fish them again and let the other species reproduce. So it's kind of like the machine, so they're working together. Nature can rebuild itself, but we can definitely help by taking the right precautions, the right methods and management, and we can solve this overfishing problem.